So, Casper, we've called this podcast We're All in the Same Boat. And I'm going to challenge you on that because I don't think we are. I think some of our boats are spacious and luxurious. I think some of our boats are very small. I think some of our boats have broken oars. Some are dinghies. I think we're all in the same sea or all in the same storm. But I would argue with you that we're not all in the same boat. Would you agree with me there?
Well, I think metaphorically, you're right. We're all in different boats, but I think emotionally, we're all in the same boat. That we're all figuring out how do we deal with what's around us. And, I kind of like take the whole thing, we're in the same boat, from having spent 3 years of my life in small boats and being surrounded by other people. And, what I learned during all of that is that 3 years at sea, it's got nothing to do with wind and waves and ropes and sails. It's all about people and emotions and how do you deal with stuff. And I think that's the parallel with where we are now. I think that's where we're all in the same boat. We're dealing with uncertainty and, trying to figure out what this new world looks like. I think that's the common denominator.
Absolutely. So I want to go deeper here into this boat thing. I'm obsessed with the boat, you'll notice. Tell me, so you were stuck in your boat as a family. Stuck, you were enjoying it. You chose to be there.
We made a choice to do it, which is fundamentally different to where we are
Fundamentally different. But tell me, describe to me, because I've not seen this boat, apart from obviously the photographs. I'd like to know, how big is it? How many rooms have you got? What space did you have?
Yeah. So I spent 3 years of my life on two boats. The first boat, there was 18 people. It was 72 foot long. And you can imagine that it's a small space. You're crammed into that, 18 strong personalities. That was the first yacht race. The second one, it was a 53 foot boat with 5 of us on board. The main living space is smaller than your average kitchen. And so literally you can't go anywhere without there being other people around you the whole time. So the first time I was not working, the second time I was working. So I was basically working and trying to juggle homeschooling and sailing the boat and navigation and work all at the same time. So I think there's some parallels there to where we are right now.
Actually, there are a lot of parallels. That's really interesting. And that's quite a small space. And the fact that you say there was nowhere where you could go, maybe perhaps the bathroom, I don't know, where you could be on your own. That I would find that difficult personally. But let's go into some more detail into that. How long were you at sea? What was the longest time where you weren't on land?
Yes, so the first yacht race, 42 days was the longest period. On the second one, it was 22 days was the longest we went without being able to step foot off the boat. So, but it's interesting as well, by the way, while we were on that boat, there was no Netflix, there was no YouTube, there was no sort of like going out to the shops, anything like that. So it's a different thing. So
so that raises a couple of questions for me there, because you're going to see how my mind goes. So there's no Netflix, there's no YouTube. How do you deal with the boredom?
Right. So actually, what we found on the boat is because we had to keep the boat sailing, and I was also working at the same time. I personally never had any time to deal with boredom. It just didn't arise for me. So when I wrote my first book, that was when we were sailing across the Atlantic, second time. I got up at 3 o'clock every morning to write 2,000 words a day because it was the only time that it was peaceful, when there weren't children around. But with the kids, the way that we dealt with, they had the potential to get bored, but we found things that they were curious and interested in. We tried to follow the national curriculum. It was impossible because, and it's funny, I was talking to my wife this morning and she's been trying to get our 8-year-old to follow the homeschooling. And she said, I've just been overwhelmed by all this stuff. And so our simple thing is find the things which each person is interested in and follow that thread wherever it takes them. Because if you try and push water uphill, you're going to end up with terrorists around with kids going a little bit crazy. So finding things that interest each person and engage each person.
Okay, so that's interesting, that 22 days dealing with boredom, but what about exercise? Because I'm sure there are people actually who don't have gardens, who probably are in small houses and have kids around them. How did you exercise? I mean, I suppose you could jump into the water. Was that safe to do that, or could you not do that?
No, we never did that because you're sailing across oceans, and the thought of sort of a boat disappearing away from you is a bit too scary. So like the boat is moving the whole time, which is another dimension. People get seasick and all that sort of stuff. So your body's always working, your muscles are always working. But at the same time, there were certain voyages we did circuits. So we'd be in the cockpit and we do press ups and we do dips and things like that. Now it's easy, right? I'm going out for walks for an hour a day. I went up early this morning. I went for a run. So we can go and do that right now. But on the boat, then you've just got to find some way of doing circuits and pulling sails around and things like that. Then that provides a little bit of exercise. It's not the same to being on land. So.
Okay, so did you create a routine then that included exercising?
So we didn't really have a formal routine. I mean, routine, not in terms of exercise. The most important routines we had were in terms of how do we manage the kids, because they've got this energy which is exploding all over the place, which many people may be experiencing now. And the way that we approached it was like the morning between 9 and 12 is when our really focused schoolwork would happen. And most of the time that would be my wife, Nicola, who would be taking on the homeschooling whilst I would be sailing the boats. And then in the afternoon, we would build in more fun and more playtime for the kids to let off steam and things like that. So it was having structures around that and also having sort of set meal times. So every meal time, we all sat down together, we talked, and again, doing exactly the same thing now, because those routines are really, really important. But we just found that we had to relax the whole sort of school routine things, and I think the parallel here is, our normal way of living, our normal rules of life are just being ripped up at the moment. And so everyone's trying to figure out how to do this stuff. And I think there's a lot of people out there, my sense is giving themselves a hard time because they can't do all the things that they could do before. And I think we need to look at this in a fresh way. And look, the other difference is we had, 5 years to prepare for this. So we could think through how things were going to be dealt with. Everyone's now in a situation where we're all making this up on the hoof. No one's got a blueprint for this. And so it's like, well, what's the best way to do this? So for me, it's being planned, but also having a good amount of flexibility in there at the same time as well.
Some great advice there, great top tips. And you're absolutely right. It's all been thrust upon us. I always say that I love change, but only when I'm leading it. And it's not when it's thrust upon me. When it's thrust upon me, I hate it. Okay, so here's another big question, because obviously the question, everyone's going to be shouting at me to ask this question: toilet paper. Did you hoard lots of toilet paper?
Didn't see that question coming. So we had supplies of toilet paper enough to get us through an ocean. So, so actually marine toilets, then you strictly ration the amount of toilet paper that you have. So, it wasn't like we counted out for each person. It's like, right, there's your eight sheets for the day or whatever else it is. But we were pretty mindful of that. So, I'm not suggesting anyone brings in toilet paper rationing unless there's another run on it. In that case, then, no pun intended, by the way. So
no. Okay, but on a more serious note here. So obviously, we're all trying to plan our rations. We're all trying to plan our food and our, all the various things that we need to get, because we want to avoid going out too many times. Is there any advice you can give with regards to planning that? And did you because you couldn't call up for a delivery, when you were out for 22 days, how do you plan what you're going to have? And you have to be very strict, and because a lot of us are overeating and over drinking, let's be honest. You can't do that surely on a boat.
No, so once you've left land, you've got what you've got. There's no sail through McDonald's or sail through Tesco's in the middle of the ocean. So we did have to plan that out. First yacht race, we had day bags made up. So for a 42-day leg, we would have 42 bags, and you pull out, and that's got all the food for that day. With the second trip that I did, we had a rotating 7-day menu. And so basically it was all predefined what we were going to have for breakfast, lunch and dinner. And then it rotated every 7 days, and we bought all the food for that. I think, the situation we're now, there's no food shortages, or that, provided people are sensible about this, there's going to be no food shortages. So, I think just going out at sensible times and, not over ordering and not under ordering, just trying to pick a sensible line through that, I think is the way forward.
Yeah, no, it's more about planning so that you can minimize the number of trips that you do, because we all want to do what we can to stay at home. So I suppose, because I'm not the best planner when it comes to food. When it comes to work, yes. When it comes to food, I don't like planning out because I change my mind. So I'd struggle if I had my 42 days planned out and I have to have that. I'd probably want to sort of switch things around and cause chaos. But anyway, let's not go there. So what about chores? So I'm finding it hard to adapt to the fact that I actually have to do my own cleaning and ironing. So, I mean, the ironing's just not happening. What about for you guys on the boat? Did you have rotas? Or did certain people do? I mean, David always does the rubbish, for example. That's his, I don't do that. Did you do the same thing? Did you have certain things that you did, certain things Nicola did, certain things the kids had to do?
So this is a really important area. And I've got two things to say on this. The first thing is about getting the roles right. So when we were at sea, we had two different types of roles. We had the husband-wife role, and then we had the captain and the first mate role. Confuse those things at your peril. I'll give you a story. We were in the middle of a storm, and we had to get a sail down in a hurry. And I spoke directly and abruptly to Nicola. It's like, Nicola, you need to do this now. And she turned around to me. It's like, don't speak to me like that, or I'm not going to do it. And it's like, no. We're in the middle of a storm. You've got to do this now. And so she thought we were in a husband-wife conversation, but actually we were in a captain-first mate conversation. So because of the nature of that, we had to embrace that and have the conversations about, now that we're all living and working together in the same space, what are our roles? What are you doing? What am I doing? And I think for many people, they will not have had that conversation because they've just never had need to do that, because they haven't been living together like 24/7 like we are now. So the way that we approached that conversation is we did this strengths exercise to find out what we were both really, really good at doing. Funny, I've just actually made this whole thing live on my website. It's called the Superpowers Quiz. And it's basically, you ask people, what are the things that you're exceptionally good at doing? And it turns out, I'm really good at sort of big picture stuff, about telling stories, all the stuff that I stand on stages and talk about. Whereas Nicola is exceptionally good at doing detail things. So for example, on a boat, traditionally you'd expect the man to do a blue job, which is fixing the engine, and a woman to do a pink job, which is doing the cooking. Cooking is creative, that's right in my bag. Fixing an engine, that's totally detailed orientated, reading the manuals, that's actually Nicola's bag. So we defined our roles and responsibilities based on what we were both good at doing. So we're at home now, I'm doing all the cooking, Nicola's doing all the clearing up. I'm spending most of my time working, she's spending most of the time schooling, and then we have an off-watch period where she goes out for a few hours and does her own stuff. So again, it's just fine-tuning things based on what we're both good at doing, what comes most naturally to us. And it's just, having the open conversation around that.
Oh, that's great. That's fantastic. I mean, I'm really lucky because David likes to relax by cooking and I like to eat. So for me, that's fantastic. The only thing is the waistline is expanding. So I'm hoping this isn't going to last too long because otherwise I'm in trouble. But anyway, so that's great. So how long did it take for you to adapt to being in a more confined space and to living in the boat as such?
Yeah, you're not going to like this answer. It took me so I went from working 16 hours in the business to being on the boat 24/7 with the kids and Nicola. I'd say it took me about 3 months to adjust to that. So, and I remember we stopped in the Canary Islands, we're a couple of months in, and a friend of ours took the kids away for 24 hours and then brought them back 24 hours later. And I was like, I'm not ready for them back, take them away again, please. Because it's just that adjustment to that different way of life. And that's the thing that I think many of us, again, it's been forced upon us and we have to deal with that. So the answer to it is understanding our own emotional reactions, our own emotional black spots, what's going on, because that's where all this stuff lies. But yeah, I found that quite tricky in that period of adjustment. It's quite normal, it's quite natural for me now. So we're in the situation now, it's fine, it's easy, but only because I've done this quite a lot. But I suspect lots of other people are finding that adjustment quite tricky right now. So.
And also, I think what you'll find is that different people adjust at different times. So, for example, I've been through some big lows and I feel I'm coming out the other end and I sort of am taking control. But I'm finding that David is just beginning to go through the lows. He had a personal loss, which some people will know, and he's just beginning to deal with that. And I dealt with it earlier because I was able to, because I had the bandwidth, because my business stopped, whereas he's been so busy. So I think that's the other thing is that as I'm feeling better, he's so I suppose we're supporting each other, but it means it takes even longer in a way. And yeah, let's hope we don't have to be like this for 3 months, but maybe we will. Let's see. We'll have to review. So
it's interesting, by the way, just on that. So I was on a mastermind call on Friday, and there were some people on there who are extroverts and some people are introverts. And the more introverted people are finding this is great. The extroverted people are going, ah. So it all just depends on our personality blueprint and what we're like, and how quickly we adjust to this. So.
Yeah, and also no one's 100% extrovert or 100% introvert in reality. Of course, we're all a bit of a mixture, aren't we, of all? So tell me, did the experience change your personality, would you say? I mean, you said you'd gone from your 16 hours working and then suddenly 24/7. Did you become more tolerant, less tolerant, more patient? Are you a nicer person?
I'm a more aware person, I think. It forces you to stare hard at your emotional black spots. So when you're under pressure, what happens? What shows up? Is it blame? Is it perfection? Is it anger? Is it frustration? Whatever those things, we all have an emotional home that we go to. And when we're under pressure, it comes out even faster. So for me, it was a level of understanding about how do we deal with things. And it's funny, so we had a saying on the boat for dealing with cabin fever, because it's funny that the first yacht race I did, I remember 18 strong personalities on board. And I remember those two big guys ended up having a stand-up fight over who had the best chocolate bar. Can you imagine that?
Yeah, I can actually.
And you realise that, as I say, it's about how do you deal? How do you? I mean, the formula E+R=O always comes up. The event plus the reaction equals the outcome. Always about understanding your reaction. How are you going to respond to those different things? So that's what it teaches you. And there's a process of introspection and staring hard. It's like, what are you doing in that situation? How are you responding to that? And again, I think that's what many people are facing right now. And that's going to be the way to get through this, is understanding your reaction and perhaps finding different mechanisms, different ways to deal with what's coming up for you.
So that's interesting, because that's about you and what you learned and what you came out of it with. Did you learn anything new about Nicola? Is that too personal? Can we share?
So it's interesting because we both went on our own emotional journeys. And now I always talk about, what's your single biggest emotional black hole? For me, mine used to be blame. And when something comes, it was somebody else's fault. So you find, and it's like, I remember back in my corporate days, that was kind of like the standard thing. That was how I was ingrained with it.
Like Trump, really, isn't it? It's everybody else's fault.
Yeah, please don't put me in the same sentence.
Sorry.
For Nicola, she won't mind me saying this because I've just written it in the book that I'm just finishing at the moment. It was about perfection. So everything for her has to be perfect, and therefore, if it's not perfect, she will procrastinate and put things off. So it's that whole process around there. But we all have one of those things, and it's there's a lot of answers on the other side of it.
So the children, in a way, this time, the time for you on the boat and the time for people at home with their children, there is a great benefit, even although they might be struggling, of spending some quality time that maybe fathers who normally are out working 16 hours a day are at home and they're getting some great time. So is there any advice on how to make the most of that and really get the best out of it?
Yes. So lots of things on this. So I think the first thing is holding in your mind that because we're in this situation here, you may well get less done than normal. And it's giving yourself a little bit of breathing space around that. So that's the first thing. It's buying yourself a little bit of time, right? The world's slowed down. And some people it's sped up in all sorts of crazy ways. But just like imagine you've got a little bit more time than usual. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I'm finding is a lot of companies that I'm working with, speaking to at the moment, actually people are being a lot more productive because they haven't got distractions. And so actually they're able to get at their computer and to sort of get on with lots more work than they would do ordinarily. So if you take that thing that sort of A, give yourself space, B, actually with the time you're using, you may be more productive. That, for my mind, creates some space. So go and spend it with your kids. Find out what are the things they love doing, and encourage them to be more of who they are becoming. So, for example, my 8-year-old Willow, she's taken hold of my wife Nicola's phone, and she's become our social secretary. She says, you're messaging all Nicola's friends. If they don't reply within about 5 minutes, she's sending them poo emojis. And I promise you that gets responses really, really fast because she thinks they're coming from Nicola, or her friends think they're coming from Nicola. So she's now speaking to lots of our friends, and so all her social things are coming up. And you realize how gregarious she is. So it's encouraging to do that. My son Columbus, he's really gone back to his cooking. And it's just finding things that ignite each child and just seeing the world with them and spending time with them. So
fantastic. And what if it comes to a point where they get a bit down and a bit frustrated because they can't see their friends and they can't do the thing. And even like Nicola can't see her friends, you can't see her friends. How do you keep the team spirits up? How do you keep the family spirits up?
So interesting. I think we're taking a lead from the kids here because they are all over Face Party and FaceTime and all this sort of stuff. House Party, and they are connecting with all their friends, and that they're teaching us what to do. So actually, they've figured it out long ahead of us. For us, sort of whether it's in work calls or whether it's social calls, Zoom calls are sort of the substitute for that. So I have to say, for us personally, that's not really proving to be an issue, to be honest. I think the most important thing is for Nicola and I, we're going out and we're going for a walk every other day and just having time talking, which I think is super important. I think having that underlying level of communication is really healthy for any relationship, not talking about work stuff, not talking about kids stuff. So just having some time to just let your brain breathe and relax and not be in that situation. So.
Okay, so for people who are not having such a good time as you guys are experts in this. It's about connecting and communicating and making sure that you're still having those connections, even if they're not, face to face, that they are using whatever technology we have and communicating.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. It's staying connected. I think one of the other things with that, it's really important to not end up disappearing into a digital world and just looking at the news and social media feeds all the time. That was a mental health problem beforehand. It's probably 10, 20x that now. So, pick up the phone, just have a chat with someone like the old-fashioned way. But it's just staying connected. Super, super important. Keep those conversations flowing.
Okay, so if you were to leave us with one final thought or one final piece of advice, what would that be? What haven't I asked you?
Yeah, I think the whole thing about having a plan for a week and having your routines in there and just trying to create your own normal. So, I'm an early riser. I get up at 6:30 every morning, shower, shave, get myself dressed. I'm always at my desk at 8 o'clock every morning. I'll go for a walk at 12:30. I'll have lunch breakfast and lunch and dinner with the kids. So it's just trying to have a structured day. And that for me has been the most helpful thing. And of course, building some exercise in there, whether that's a walk or whether it's circuits or something like that. But just trying to create your own normal, create your own normal routine, follow that.
Fantastic. And it's good to see that you're not wearing your pajamas. That's wonderful.
None of that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Caspar.
You're welcome, Maureen. Nice to talk to you.